Welcome to our video on the number 10 most racist countries in Europe. Today we're diving into a sensitive yet crucial topic that touches the very core of our humanity. Racism is not just an isolated issue, it's a pervasive ideology that manifests in various ways across the globe, often revealing deep-seated fears and prejudices. We'll explore how different countries grapple with immigration, race, and national identity, and why these discussions are more important than ever. Brace yourself for an eye-opening journey that may challenge your views and spark some heated discussions in the comment section. Number 10. Italy. Italy, with its rich history and diverse culture, has recently faced rising tides of racism, especially against migrants from Africa and the Middle East. The country's economic struggles have often been blamed on immigrants, fueling a narrative that equates migration with crime and job loss. Politicians have capitalized on these fears, using inflammatory rhetoric to rally support for anti-immigrant policies. In recent years, Italy's response to the migrant crisis has been characterized by hostility and neglect. Reports of overcrowded detention centers and inhumane conditions have surfaced, painting a grim picture of how the country treats those seeking refuge. The media often portrays migrants as burdens rather than human beings, leading to public support for stricter border controls and deportations. Moreover, incidents of violence against immigrants have surged, with far-right groups gaining traction in many regions. Their slogans and actions reflect a troubling shift in public sentiment, where cultural purity is prioritized over compassion. As Italy continues to grapple with its colonial past and present-day realities, one must ask, is the nation truly a land of opportunity, or has it succumbed to a cycle of intolerance and fear? Number 9. Greece. Greece has been a frontline state in Europe's migration crisis, receiving thousands of refugees seeking asylum. However, the government's response has been anything but welcoming. The islands of Lesbos and Samos are infamous for their overcrowded camps, where desperate migrants live in squalid conditions, often without adequate food, water, or medical care. Greece's militarized approach to immigration has included reports of violent pushbacks against migrants attempting to enter the country, often contradicting international law. This harsh treatment has fostered a climate of fear and hostility, both among migrants and within the local population. Media narratives frequently depict migrants as criminals or as a burden on society, further entrenching racist attitudes. As nationalist sentiments rise, far-right groups in Greece have become more vocal, advocating for the expulsion of non-European migrants. Public support for such groups indicates a troubling shift in societal values, where the idea of a homogeneous national identity takes precedence over humanitarian obligations. Greece's historical legacy of tolerance is under threat, prompting us to ask, can Greece reclaim its compassionate roots, or is it too far gone in its quest for cultural purity? Number 8. Hungary. Hungary's government, under Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, has implemented some of the strictest immigration policies in Europe. The country has erected fences along its borders and has been vocal about its disdain for migrants, often using derogatory language to describe them. This has created a hostile environment where immigrants are viewed as invaders rather than individuals seeking safety. The portrayal of migrants in Hungarian media often emphasizes fear and crisis, fostering public support for the government's hardline stance. Reports of systemic discrimination against Roma and other minority groups further highlight Hungary's racial issues. The government's anti-immigrant campaigns have not only targeted non-Europeans but have also contributed to an atmosphere of xenophobia that affects all marginalized communities. As Hungary grapples with its identity amidst the European Union's push for inclusivity, one has to wonder, is this nationalist approach a legitimate defense of cultural integrity, or merely a guise for deeper racial animosities that threaten the very fabric of a diverse society? Number 7. France. France has long prided itself on its values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. However, the reality for many immigrants and minorities tells a different story. The country has witnessed a rise in Islamophobia, particularly in the wake of terrorist attacks attributed to radicalized individuals. This has led to widespread discrimination against Muslims, who are often scapegoated for societal problems. The government's policies, such as the controversial burqa ban and the policing of Muslim communities, reflect a growing intolerance masked as secularism. Racial profiling is prevalent, with people of color facing disproportionate scrutiny and violence from law enforcement. The rise of far-right parties in France underscores the troubling acceptance of racist ideologies in mainstream politics. As France grapples with its colonial past and the realities of a multicultural society, one must question whether the nation's commitment to equality truly extends to all its citizens, or if systemic racism continues to thrive beneath the surface. Number 6. Poland. Poland's nationalist government has taken a firm stance against immigration, particularly from Muslim-majority countries. The country's reluctance to accept refugees during the European migrant crisis has drawn international criticism, with many labeling Poland as an outlier in the EU's commitment to humanitarian values. Racist rhetoric is pervasive in Polish politics, with leaders often framing immigrants as a threat to national security and cultural integrity. Public demonstrations against the acceptance of migrants have gained momentum, fueled by misinformation and xenophobic narratives. The treatment of the LGBTQ+ community in Poland also highlights the broader issues of intolerance and discrimination within the country. As Poland navigates its identity in a rapidly changing Europe, one has to ask, is its rejection of multiculturalism a rightful defense of sovereignty, or a dangerous embrace of an exclusionary ideology that risks isolating the nation from the global community? Number 5. Slovakia. Slovakia has maintained a largely homogeneous society, and the prospect of immigration has triggered significant backlash among its citizens. The government's reluctance to accept refugees, particularly during the European migrant crisis, has been met with widespread support from the public, who often express concerns about cultural dilution. Racism is ingrained in the fabric of Slovak society, with the Roma community facing systemic discrimination and social exclusion. The portrayal of immigrants in Slovak media typically leans towards the negative, framing them as criminals and threats to public safety. Far-right groups have exploited these sentiments, gaining political traction and promoting xenophobic ideologies. As Slovakia continues to grapple with its historical identity and its place in Europe, one must ponder, is the country's rejection of diversity a necessary measure for national preservation, or a harmful denial of the benefits that multiculturalism can bring? Number 4. Spain. Spain's historical ties to colonialism have cast a long shadow over its contemporary approach to immigration. While the country is a gateway for many migrants from Africa and Latin America, the realities for these individuals are often harsh. Reports of abuse in detention centers and instances of violence against migrants paint a disturbing picture of Spain's treatment of those seeking refuge. The narrative surrounding immigration in Spain is often tinged with racism, as economic fears are frequently projected onto immigrants who are scapegoated for high unemployment rates. The rise of far-right political parties has emboldened anti-immigrant sentiments, leading to public demonstrations against the perceived invasion of migrants. As Spain grapples with its colonial past and the ongoing migration crisis, one must consider, is the government's approach a reflection of a legitimate concern for national stability, or is it simply a convenient excuse for perpetuating racial discrimination? Number 3. Belgium. Belgium's complex history of colonization, particularly in Congo, has left lasting impacts on its societal dynamics. Today, the country faces significant challenges regarding racism and xenophobia, particularly towards North African and Middle Eastern immigrants. Reports of discrimination in housing, employment, and education are rampant, highlighting the systemic issues that permeate Belgian society. The rise of the far right in Belgium has amplified anti-immigrant rhetoric, with political leaders capitalizing on fears surrounding terrorism and economic instability. The media often sensationalizes incidents involving immigrants, perpetuating stereotypes that paint them as dangerous and untrustworthy. Public attitudes towards immigrants are increasingly polarized, with many viewing them as threats to national identity. As Belgium navigates its multicultural landscape, one must reflect, can the country move beyond its colonial past to embrace a more inclusive future, or are entrenched prejudices too deeply rooted to overcome? Number 2. Bulgaria. Bulgaria's treatment of immigrants has raised serious concerns, particularly regarding its policies toward refugees from Syria and Afghanistan. The government has implemented stringent border controls and built fences to deter migrants, often using inflammatory rhetoric that portrays them as invaders. This has fostered a climate of fear and suspicion towards immigrants, with many Bulgarians viewing them as threats to national security. Reports of systemic abuse against migrants in detention centers have emerged, with numerous accounts of physical violence and degrading treatment. Human rights organizations have condemned Bulgaria for its harsh asylum procedures, often leaving refugees in limbo without adequate support or resources. The portrayal of migrants in Bulgarian media frequently emphasizes crime and instability, further entrenching negative stereotypes in public consciousness. The rise of far-right groups who openly advocate for the expulsion of non-European migrants reflects a broader trend of xenophobia in Bulgarian society. Many citizens feel that their cultural identity is under threat, and this sentiment has been exploited by political leaders to gain support. As Bulgaria navigates its relationship with immigration, it raises the troubling question, is the government's approach justified protectionism or simply a facade for racist attitudes that refuse to acknowledge the country's diverse heritage? Number 1. The United States of America. The United States has long prided itself on being a melting pot of cultures. However, the reality of racism in the country is far more complex and deeply entrenched. The ongoing debates surrounding racial equality, immigration, and systemic racism have brought to light the darker side of America's self-image as the land of the free. Despite the progress made during the civil rights movement, the country continues to grapple with deep-rooted issues of racial inequality and discrimination that affect nearly every aspect of life. One of the most significant areas where racism manifests in the U.S. is the criminal justice system. African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities are disproportionately targeted by law enforcement, leading to higher rates of incarceration and police violence in these communities. The infamous cases of police brutality, such as the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, have sparked national protests and international outrage. These incidents have fueled the Black Lives Matter movement and renewed calls for reform, but significant change remains elusive. Immigration has also become a flashpoint for racial tension in the U.S. The Trump administration's policies, including the travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries and the separation of children from their families at the U.S.-Mexico border, were widely criticized as being racially motivated. These policies highlighted the deep-seated fears and prejudices many Americans hold against immigrants, particularly those from Latin America and the Middle East. Even under new leadership, the debate over immigration remains polarized, with many advocating for stricter border controls, while others push for more humane treatment of refugees and asylum seekers. Moreover, economic inequality in the U.S. has disproportionately impacted minority communities, leading to a widening racial wealth gap. African Americans and Latinos are more likely to live in poverty, have less access to quality education, and face significant barriers to upward mobility compared to their white counterparts. Housing discrimination, redlining, and unequal access to health care further compound these disparities, making it increasingly difficult for minority families to break the cycle of poverty. In the realm of politics, racism continues to play a divisive role. The election of Donald Trump and his subsequent rise to power emboldened far-right groups and white supremacists, leading to events like the Charlottesville rally, where violence erupted between neo-Nazis and counter-protesters. The lingering effects of these movements still resonate today, with hate crimes against minorities, especially African Americans, Asian Americans, and Jewish communities, on the rise. While the Biden administration has condemned these groups and promised to address the issue, many feel that the problem is too deeply embedded in American society to be easily uprooted. As America confronts its racial demons, the country remains starkly divided. Some Americans believe that systemic racism is a myth perpetuated by liberal elites, while others argue that racial injustice is one of the most pressing issues of our time. This polarization is reflected not only in politics but also in everyday life, as social media becomes a battleground for debates on race, identity, and privilege. One must ask, is the United States truly living up to its ideals of equality and justice for all? Or has the nation's long history of racism left indelible scars that continue to divide it today? The answer is far from simple, and as the country struggles to reconcile its past with its future, the fight for racial equality in America is far from over. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.